Hey, the Portrait here. This is going to be another exercise for the class Realism for Beginners, more specifically for the first class, which really aims to make you understand what makes a drawing realistic. If you haven't seen the first class video or the first exercise video, definitely check those out. And today we're going to draw a sphere instead of a cube. Tools that I'm going to use is my blending stump, which I'm going to be talking more about in the next class, charcoal pencil, and maybe a little bit of compressed charcoal, and kneaded eraser. Alright, the goal is obviously understand how to make something look more realistic. I'm not concerned too much about the construction, how round you make the sphere, but to make that the sphere rounder, so I just found this tape thingy. Alright, first I feel like doing some kind of background, because I want to have a highlight around here, right, of the sphere. I want to have some shadows here and maybe a shadow here, and I want some dark background, just a little bit to contrast that with. So what am I saying? I don't want to lose this edge, this construction line, which is a lot easier than the cube that I did. So maybe the sphere is on the surface. You can take some creative liberty with the way you do your background. Maybe you can draw like a table with an edge. You can draw a wall, like maybe make it really dark. However you like. I'm just gonna blend that a little bit. I can use my blending tool here, or because I'm blending in a large area and I'm not concerned about too concerned about making the blend extremely polished and refined, because I'm just doing kind of an abstract background, maybe with a little bit of gradient. This corner may be a little bit darker. I'm just gonna blend this with a piece of just a tissue paper. And there's gonna be quite a bit of texture, because ooh, looks like kind of looks like a planet. The way it's like Jupiter, right? Alright. And I think I'm losing some of the edges that I did for the construction. I'll just bring the tape back out. Okay. I think that's enough for the areas that I want to cover. Feel free to make yours like more polished. First thing, I'm going to bring this back, and I'm going to do, because I just lost the line, and I'm just going to draw. And I'm doing this relatively light, because I don't want to, again, remember what we said, we're creating edges and the lines based on contrast between two shapes. So never by, almost not never, but rarely by itself. You know, that's what I mean. Okay, so we're gonna assume the light source. I'm just gonna draw a little light source. Okay. Coming like that. And there are different types of light, which I can do that in another separate class. All right, so the shadow, which will just be a kind of elliptical shape, where first thing is, if you are using the tools that I use, which is easy. If you're not using the tools that I use, you cannot follow my technique, obviously, but try to accomplish eventually the end goal anyway. So what I'm going to do, since I'm using soft charcoal, I'm just going to first not worry anything about highlights or the dark areas, the shadows. I'm going to give it an even tone of mid-tone. That's all I'm care about. So I want to make this whole area a little bit darker. Maybe so that it's dark to such a degree that the outline that I finally drew just kind of disappears. Maybe that's how dark I want it to be. And I'll consider that a midtone. Sometimes the shading accidental gradient comes out, but you know, those are not, like this side is not meant to be dark. So think of this as flat right now, just you're drawing a flat disc. I might speed part of the videos up because when they get boring, you get the point anyway. Again, careful not to leave any lines by themselves because you will not see that in the real world. Alright. And because I'm doing this my way, I'm gonna blend this entire circle with my blending tool, which is gonna make it quite even and very smooth, a little bit more smooth. And I might spend some time afterwards just work on a little bit more to make it smoother, but I don't make the whole thing more polished. I'm not sure if that is necessary, but so make sure the edges are gone, so all you see is this disc right now. Any gradient right now, it's unintentional and it doesn't really matter because we're going to tweak it and fix it. And how light and dark the ball is obviously depends on the nature of the ball itself, what kind of material it is made from, what if there's a color to the ball, and so on. So that doesn't matter too much either. So if you make this a little bit lighter or darker than what I've drawn, that's fine. No, that's not the point of these first two exercises. And for the shadow, I don't want to lose. I might as well put something down right now. So the shadow will be roughly around here. Supposed to be a perfect, elliptical, but I'm probably going to screw up a little bit because I'm just eyeballing this. Well, I'm just imagining this, kind of. So I did pull out a few pictures of the spheres early on, I'm not even sure why. Just to see if there's anything interesting that I don't want to forget when doing this drawing. Shadow can be quite dark. Depends on your background. And generally the way shadow works is the further the shadow is away from the object that is casting the shadow, hence it's called cast shadow, right? Generally the further the shadow away from the object is, the edge of the shadow becomes blurrier and blurrier, the edge. But we can add that blurriness a little bit later on. Right now I just want to make sure I don't lose shadow. Okay, I'm going to blend this. Those two, I'm guessing after I blend the shadow and the ball right now will take on a similar tone, which it doesn't matter. If the shadow will probably be oh wow, shadow's quite a bit darker, which is fine. Which will work just fine actually. Be like a light ball, like a white or a gray ball. And with reflections, I might as well talk about it. When you draw objects, how it reflects tells you about the nature of the material, but it also tells you about the nature of the light. And that's where hard light and soft light, you might hear about those terms in photography, comes in. But I think I might devote a future class just to all those things. So far so good. We just joined two shapes. One here, one here. Make the tones even. Okay, now we can choose to whether to work on the highlights first or the dark tones first. I like to work on the dark tones first, just so I don't know, just a habit. You can do it however you want, but if you want to follow along, I guess you're working on the dark tones first too then. Since the light is coming from this side, we're gonna make this edge, we're gonna start to darken this edge on the back. And during this drawing, I might also talk a little bit about concepts like reflecting light, because you can't really draw a sphere without have that element in there. A reflective light is basically light that's going to be, this is the main light source right here. Okay, it's going to come down. You would say, okay, so this part is the darkest. That's actually not true, because it's on the surface, and the surface is going to bounce this light back up the ball. So the darkest part of the ball is actually roughly around like here. See this line here? It's going to be roughly around this line, specifically this part here. This around this area is actually going to be the darkest part of the ball. Slightly below that, you actually get a lot of reflective light, and above that you get the direct light. So yeah. But the edge is actually quite dark. It tapers out fast though. So there's a transition. So there shouldn't be any hard line there either. There should just be a really quick transition. So this exercise, it also teaches you a little bit about tone control, even though that's not the main goal of this exercise. But hey, it helps, because the next class is going to be all about value, and which you know, it's going to be about tone control. That's going to be a huge part of it. So if you do this right, it will look like a perfect sphere, or you know, if you do this off, it's gonna have the form. You might look like it has a bumpy surface, both of which are fine for the purpose of making something look realistic. It's just but I might do this exercise again in the future, but for, you know, another class. And if the class is about value control, then suddenly the objective changes, right? So it's not just you have to make the ball look realistic. It has to look like a ball. So the curvature and everything has to be, the gradient has to be perfect too. Well, I don't want to use the term perfect. I mean, it has to be pretty good, decent. So like I said, remember this part here is going to be actually quite dark. Same with here. No light is going to reach there, because the rebound light is the strongest rebound light is going to come down here and bounce back. I mean, don't draw the lines yourself, obviously. I'm just going to do it here. It's going to come down here and it's going to bounce up. It's going to hit around this area here, but it's not going to hit here. Nothing hits there. Here it's pretty dark. Almost like you imagine yourself as like a little beam of light. You know, what would you do? How would you do? How would you bounce around? And where would you touch? You know, regarding the ball. Okay. This is where blending helps so much. You can do this without blending. You just have to be a lot more careful with the way you're shading. Because right now you see this part here, I made it a little bit too dark. Because I know I'm gonna blend and then I can polish, I have the leeway to make that mistake. But if you are just doing it purely without blending, you just have to be a lot more careful with the way you're rendering straight off the bat. Okay, so now I'm gonna start to blend this part out. And also, as I'm blending, I'm actually using various pressure with my tool to create almost different levels of blend. Like some part I wanted to have like really smudged, And some part I don't want to smudge it too much. I would just be very light with how I'm using this tool. See, that's what I mean. If you see right now, if I just leave this as it is, it looks kind of realistic, but it looks like this side of the ball is kind of flat. It's almost like, you know, you have this perfect, almost perfect round ball, but with one side of it is a flat, like kind of like a rock or something like that. And that's what I mean. If you screw the gradient up, it's gonna change its form. But it's actually good for you to actually experiment and see how the form changes as you change the gradient. But it doesn't matter how the form changes, as long as you understood the concept in our first class, it's gonna look realistic, you know. Okay. And shadow's gonna be quite dark. Especially if the light source is a hard light. Hard light generally means light that is either further apart or smaller than the object. Like our sun, ultimately it's about relativity, but like our sun generally can make very hard light shadows. Even though it's huge, but because it's so tiny, it's so far away, it's relatively speaking, it's almost like it's smaller than the object. That's why if I place the pencil under direct sunlight, or if you place your hand under direct sunlight, you know, if you go outside, your hand is gonna have a very clear shadow on the outer edge, despite the sun being extremely big, because it's so far away. Okay. I think that's, I mean, look, that relativity alone, now we're getting a much more 3D feel of this ball. And what I'm doing right now is just refining the dark parts, and refine the parts that I'm going to edit later on with my highlights, because I'm going to make this part brighter and maybe the reflective part a little bit brighter, this part a little bit smoother. See, I'm almost following that curve that I did early on. You can do the same thing. And we're assuming there's only one light source. It gets more complicated if there's a multiple light source going on. It gets complicated fast. Multiple shadows overlap, multiple highlights. Then you gotta think about like multiple reflections, and just let's stick with one light source for now. Yeah. Okay, I think this looks good so far. It could look better, obviously, as we tweak it. I think this side could be darker, but I don't want to make this exercise too much about precise value control or precise sphere lighting. And like I mentioned early on, the reflective light, it's not going to hit the very bottom part, so you can make that part there quite a bit darker. But ideally you don't lose that edge of the entire cube. I mean, not cube, the sphere. Okay, now that we got the mid-tone and dark tones down, good enough down at least, I'm gonna focus on just the highlights, and then we're done. This is why my method, if you using soft charcoal, since just go by, you can do things so much faster, to be honest. So I'm actually going to increase background darkness here a bit more. I want the highlight here to really contrast with the background here. Alright. Even though I'm losing the kind of that even gradient that I want for the background, but when you do the background first you would, I guess you could, if you imagine this ball is on the table or on the ground, you can make the background much darker and have a slight gradient towards some direction. Not straight up and down maybe, because that's a little boring and it doesn't make sense with the light. But you can make maybe this side a little bit brighter and this side a little bit darker. So there's a gradient of background going on. Or you can just draw an edge here and blur that out, and that looks like the edge of a table. Anyway, so let me now that I have this side, let's start with you have this light right here. It's gonna hit roughly, or let's say it hits right about here. So let's start from that point. And we're just gonna keep drawing the circle and make it tapering out. Right now I'm basically try to create a the light tone zone. You know, if 10 being darkest and 1 being lightest, I'm working from 1 to 3 right now. And any part that you accidentally erased, just put a tone back. Notice how different shapes, like scratch, like, you know, like bumps and curves comes out if you don't do the values perfectly. I use perfectly again. Don't like that word. If you don't do the values like pretty decently. And up here is and this line here, I would like to remove by other. No, just increase the background. Okay. Now the background is really contrasting. Probably should have done this from the start, but hey. This is actually, now that I'm thinking about it, this is actually a really good exercise, because for training gradient control, because any mistakes you make, it's gonna reveal to you straight away. Like if you're not make the gradient even, the ball is not gonna look like a ball. You know, like right now, it looks like the sharp part here, it goes up and goes down, and so it's actually a pretty good exercise for practice transition tones and all that, and tone control in general. I have not put down the brightest spot that I want to put down yet. I'm gonna do that near the end, probably close to near the end. I might have to use a white pencil or something. Just looking at this, does this looks like a ball? Yeah, it's okay. At this point, you can pretty much rely on your own senses just to ask yourself, does it look round? You know, does it look like a realistic sphere? Does the shape look right? You know, does the surface shape looks right? Okay, let me grab my other, or maybe other white pencil or the other eraser. I might use a little bit of white pencil here. Let's just see if I like the result. It's okay. I think that helps. Yeah, I think it helps. And I want to make the shadow that is further away just a little bit more blurry, and shadows that are very close to the cube, I keep saying cube, the sphere, a little bit sharp, fairly sharp. Like this part here is a little bit soft. I want to make it sharper. The shape of the shadow could be better in terms of geometry and all that, but hey. Yeah, so I think if you followed what I did with this video, you're gonna end up, you should end up with something that's kind of like this. Probably with better background, honestly. Because my background is weird, because I have this dark part here that's showing this part that's contrasting with the light. And then it goes to the light part that contrasting with the dark, which is really weird. But the idea that I want to show you guys is just how to draw this ball, really. And if you make the entire background even, it's gonna work better than what I have drawn here. So yeah, this is the end of the exercise. Make sure you post your drawings in the community section so I can make a tweak video later for just like the cube exercise. Alright, cheers guys. Have a nice weekend.